Hit record.
It's not legal advice, but it won't have to suffice because it's copyright waffle, copyright waffle, copyright waffle. All right.
Oh, good morning, everybody.
Morning. Hello. Happy first day of spring.
Happy first day of spring. So my name's Chris Morrison.
My name is Jane Secker.
And we are the co-chairs of the Copyright and Online Learning Special Interest Group of the Association for Learning Technology. So this is webinar number 76.
Yes.
Yes.
And we've been doing these a little while now.
We have been.
Pretty much now 5 years.
Okay.
To the day almost.
5 years? Mind me. Time flies when you're having fun.
It's 2025.
Okay.
We started these webinars in March 2020.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
That's okay.
So that's a long time, Chris.
It is. You're right.
Yeah.
So we got a good session today. Let me just reload the slides to say that we've got the usual copyright news section, but today we're talking about copyright and AI, again a returning topic, but we are delighted to be joined by colleagues from Academic Libraries North who are going to talk to us about their institutional approaches. So this is going to be a really good session.
Absolutely.
We don't want to spend too much time waffling before we get to the good part.
It's not a waffle. No,
it's not a waffle. So this is normally where we say, what have we been doing since we last met?
So our last webinar was over a month ago. It was actually on Valentine's Day.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So on the left, this is a brand new digital mixer that my band, who's called Snooze You Lose, we won a songwriting competition. It's kind of bonkers. It all happened very quickly. The deadline for the song was the same week as the copyright and AI consultation deadline.
So you
I
just
almost
did an all-nighter, didn't you?
On 2 nights that week.
Yeah.
Anyway, it came good. We won a ridiculously generous cash prize, and we've now.
And then you spent it all.
Now we spent it all and more on this lovely piece of kit. So anyway, and the band does have a theme tune, as you would probably expect.
Yes, of course.
So if you want to follow us, it's Snooze You Lose on Facebook. Bit of promo there. We've got some gigs coming up if you're around the Kent area, festivals in the summer. Enough about me and what I've been doing. What is going on here on the right?
That is not Photoshop. That's me at the Taj Mahal a couple of weeks ago. I just come back from a wonderful 2.5-week trip to India. On holiday. Just lots of people seem to think that when I go traveling I'm always working. No, I was not going to a conference. I was on a proper holiday and went to see lots of amazing things in India. Absolutely loved it. And yeah, it was just glorious. And I can bore on for ages and I won't rub it in anymore, Irene. No, but if you do want to see my 1010 photos, Chris is actually on, I think you've got to day 2.
I've got to day 2, yeah. And it is really interesting to see.
So I'm lining some up for this afternoon. To say, settle down, got some cake, cup of tea.
Just to say, we do have some work to do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, fantastic, wonderful, highly recommended.
Okay, excellent. Brilliant. So just a reminder that we have the webinar and blog archive, the recordings of the previous 75 webinars that are up there on the ALT YouTube channel, and you can always go to the copyrightliteracy.org page to see the links to all of those as well.
And the slides and everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're on to this section. Copyright news. What's in the news today?
Yay. Well, I've got a couple of things just wanted to flag up because of the topic of today's session about AI. I just thought people might be interested in an information literacy event that's happening on the 1st of April. It's about AI and information literacy teaching, and we've got one of the American professors. He's also a student learning librarian at Ohio State University, Michael Fleur, talking about the sort of teaching that he's doing. But we've also got a number of colleagues from the UK doing little case studies as well. I'm going to be chairing the session, and it's free. So actually it's free if you're a SILIP member. I think there is a very small charge if you're not, but it's going to be amazing. So I just thought I'd plug that event happening on Zoom.
Okay.
First
and
of
chaired
April. By me.
Chaired by you.
Yes.
So it's going to be an excellent session.
Yes, it's going to be expertly chaired.
Lovely. So this is another thing we think people will be interested in, fixing the ebook market. And this is work that Knowledge Rights 21 have been doing in conjunction with CILIP and an organization called Inflect, where they have been looking, as many people know, there are significant challenges around ebook licensing models and what libraries are able to do with the content that they have purchased.
And I think the webinar was Wednesday this week, wasn't it?
Yeah,
but you went to the parliamentary reception, didn't you?
I did,
on the 26th
yeah.
of
It
Feb.
was a very, very good discussion, actually, chaired by Anthony Sinnott, who did an excellent job. And we had some really good examples in front of some parliamentarians to explain what those challenges are for libraries. So an ongoing piece of work.
Yeah,
we've
definitely
got
well worth
out.
looking at the report if you haven't seen it. I think the webinar recording should be going up on that page soon.
Yeah. Okay, great. So here's a bit of news from me. Yesterday I was up in Oxford actually launching a new copyright community of practice. So the COP there stands for Community of Practice. We had about 40 people come together at the Ashmolean Headley Lecture Theatre, and that's people playing human bingo. And I just thought it would be interesting for you to see what we're up to. And Jane and I have been banging on about communities of practice. This is a community of practice right here, right now. And this is a really important way, we think, of discussing copyright issues. Oh, Rachel, yeah, the cookies were great. Yeah, I did some home baked. The ones in the floury tin are my chocolate chip cookies. And Daria from the Ashmolean, who I'm co-chairing with, did the lemon ones. Thanks, Alex. She was also there. Yes, it was a good event, and we're hoping.
Highly recommend communities of practice as a way of sharing copyright knowledge within an institution. Yeah. But also, we know there's a number of regional ones as well. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and you have to have a lot of biscuits and cake.
We do have to. I mean, to be honest, I think this is a topic for a future webinar. Let's talk about it. Maybe once we've kind of got the Oxford one up and running, I can share, and we can get some others. I know that there are some elsewhere. And in fact, today's presentation from Academic Libraries North, we know that they are supported by a very strong sense of community. So all good stuff.
More news, which I think we did mention actually as well on the 14th of February, our last webinar, but we just thought we'd mention it again, that we are still planning on going ahead with our IcePops conference at Harvard this summer, 23rd and the 25th. We have not yet issued a call for papers, but we are also hopefully going to put out some exciting news about bursaries, which will help support a couple of people from the UK who might want to go to that conference. And maybe we know that it's going to be really, really difficult for people to get funding. So it's a kind of watch this space. We're trying to get some information together. It's not yet out, but the date of the conference is. And if it's something you're interested in, there will also be hopefully some funding available, with some of our sponsors being very generous.
Very generous, we're really pleased. It's very encouraging. So yeah, please mention if it's something you think you'd be interested in, then have a think about it. We're going to be prioritizing those that would not normally be able to travel, and we know that training budgets are restricted, and we know there's a big issue here. So yeah, but we're very excited, aren't we?
Absolutely.
This looks like an excellent opportunity.
Yeah.
So we are now on to the main topic of discussion here, and we're delighted to be joined by Ben Catt, Andrew Johnson and Liesl Rowe, all part of the Academic Libraries North Consortium. Ben is Open Research Library, works at the Open Research Library, or are you Open Research Librarian, Ben?
I think that might be
librarian.
I think somehow I've substituted the word librarian for library.
There is a difference.
I know.
One is an institution, another is a person. Anyway, thank you, Ben, coming to us from the University of York. Andrew Johnson, who is also a library at the University of Sheffield, and Liesl, Senior Digital Library Advisor at Leeds Beckett University.
I'm confused.
It's easily done. So we're going to hand over to you to talk to us about what kind of policy and guidance you're developing around copyright and AI. It's a topic we've discussed on the webinar previously, and this is going to be a really excellent opportunity to share, or for you to share with us where you've got to and how you're sharing and collaborating on those ideas. So I'm just going to get your slides up, and I believe we're handing over to Andrew, you first. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Chris.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. You have the floor.
Okay, so yeah, as Chris and Jane just introduced, I'm Andrew Johnson, Scholarly Communications Librarian at the University of Sheffield. So to give an introduction to the team that we've got here at Sheffield, we're a small copyright team. I can imagine that some people are practically shouting at the screen right now thinking, what, you've got 2 FTE staff and you think that's a small team? But nonetheless it is, really, although I do realise obviously that we're quite fortunate to have that as well in some ways. There's no internal legal team at the University of Sheffield, so when it comes to providing copyright advice, we're it in terms of the copyright team here. The service that we provide is primarily copyright and licensing advice to all our staff and PGR students. We do this through a dedicated email advice service, but also through one-to-ones, face-to-face support and advice and so on. But also, in addition to that, we provide a session, a program of training sessions through the year, rather. And these are both on themed, specific, say, research or teaching themes of copyright, and also bespoke ones where we do those on demand. So that gives just a little bit of quick background on the team that we've got and where I sit within that. So moving on then in terms of our advice and how we've developed around generative AI. I suppose, like other institutions, you know, we first saw initial questions coming through to us in early 2023. These started, first of all, taking the form of questions around model terms and conditions. Some of the earliest things that we were asked for input on was things like institution looking at what models were available, what might our staff or students use, what were the terms and conditions around those, what were any copyright implications of that. And this went on in terms of giving advice to help develop policies, to help develop licenses, to help develop open reuse within the institution. Because of some of the questions that we got, I actually wrote quite an in-depth blog post for an internal staff and PGR student-only site. That was late June, early July 2023, and that was fun to write and went on to get published as a preprint. But whilst that was interesting to do and interesting to take that sort of deep dive there, it wasn't really our facing advice in terms of, well, how can we advise our users, our students? So we created a web page giving a very general overview, if you like, of guidance on copyright and generative AI. That went up in February of 2024 and a couple of minor modifications since. It's also linked from the university's statement of principles on generative AI, which goes into a great deal of information for our staff and students around things such as the ethical implications, which we'll link to from that, and copyright sits neatly into that part of the institutional principles there as part of critical AI literacy, looking at, you know, what are the issues with generative AI. We want our users to be thinking about, well, there are issues and opportunities here. There are ethical issues, there are questions around bias, environmental issues, what's in the training data set, what might that implicate in terms of what's put out of the model and so on, whilst also thinking about, well, how can they use these in a responsible and useful manner that helps their learning and research. We've also had some input in the copyright team into other internal advice pages on the staff intranet sites and also some staff and student guides. And within the library as a whole, we ran an all-staff generative AI training day. And this was run in early summer last year to give a broad overview of many topics that there were to think about for generative AI. That ran very well. I collaborated with one of my research data management colleagues, our research data steward, in giving a session on generative AI copyright and data protection, and the intersection of those worked extremely well. So much so that we were asked to run the session again and did an updated version a couple of months ago. We keep getting lots of questions, and we're seeing a steadily increasing number of questions and requests for advice or specific bespoke sessions around copyright, generative AI, licensing issues, researchers wanting to make custom AI models or chatbots for specific research purposes, for example, along with other questions that we've seen on this COOLSIG, such as authors who want advice around being contacted by publishers about the works possibly being used as part of training generative AI licensing deals between publishers and big tech companies. So to look at, well, what's gone well, the general advice sessions that we've done have gone very well. Bespoke advice in terms of our copyright advice service on one-on-ones, always well received. Combining the copyright and data protection, as I say, went very well, and including specific generative AI advice as well, where we can have direct interaction with our questioners. I would say that that is where we can get the greatest benefit to our users. But in terms of developing that further, what hasn't gone perhaps as well? Well, not so much what hasn't gone as well, but well, where are the difficulties? Well, understandably enough, there's the usual difficulty that we've seen, which is that people want specific advice. They want a definite answer more often than not. And that's, if you like, the age-old problem that we all face in terms of copyright advice. There are grey areas, there are uncertainty. We're giving risk management advice in many cases, and there are nuances and grey areas that people don't necessarily want to have to think about those. They want definite advice, but particularly when it comes to generative AI, we've for successive governments to give some sort of update that's been much rumoured, promised and speculated for several years now, and despite the fact that we've just had our recent consultation, I'm not sure anybody's really clear what's going to come from that. So we can't really give an exact steer on what to expect. We can only give people a picture of, well, what's the environment now and what things do they need to bear in mind as part of their particular projects or issues that they're encountering with generative AI. So in the current academic year, we've made a little bit of a change of direction as well. So we're still providing on-demand advice, providing the copyright advice service and bespoke sessions and so on, but also taking the view that there's a great deal of guidance and advice on our web pages, both those public-facing principles, but also a great deal of internal-facing advice around generative AI. And I should quickly note at this point that that's not in any way to sort of diminish the fact that people attending this with a role in copyright and information or critical AI literacy don't have a role to play. Absolutely, of course we do, but rather that there is a good and growing body of advice there. And so we've taken the view that we haven't updated our copyright and Gen AI guidance as yet. We're hanging on to wait and see what updates we get further. And instead, we've concentrated in terms of our new training offer. Rather than providing any new generative AI training, we're providing a much more detailed look at text and data mining in our training sessions. So we've been providing a dedicated 1-hour session on copyright and TDM, breaking down the exception terms, looking at what can and can't be done, looking at related rights and so on. And having run a few of these sessions, they've been very well received. And we found that people engaged in, for instance, machine learning research and looking at what they're allowed to do for TDM purposes have been very grateful and interested in these sessions, and we've had good feedback from them. In addition, the TDM guidance fits in neatly as some of our library colleagues are doing additional projects this year on supporting researchers with using resources and subscriptions and gaining access, understanding what can be done for text and data mining and research purposes. But that leaves some what ifs, and to sort of wrap up my part of this presentation so far, I'm going to be clear that I'm going to go into a little bit of opinion here. So this is a personal opinion view on some of the what ifs here. not necessarily a view of the University of Sheffield as a whole, and not necessarily, or certainly not, a recommendation. But what could we say? What can people out there providing a copyright advice service potentially say in the HEI sector right now? Well, we could say to people that, yeah, if you're using models with a no future training guarantee, there's no sharing of copies. Yes, people can realistically summarize that journal article, use tools like Notebook LM to interact and do their own research. Yes, it's highly unlikely that this is going to be on the receiving end of any challenge or litigation for the huge majority of researchers, and obviously it's ongoing all the time. Likewise, teaching staff using GenAI, for instance, for image production or for generating outputs for use in teaching, again, not really a risk. Exceptions will apply to a great many of the non-commercial uses that people are making of GenAI systems. If you've got as I say, a no further sharing term with your provider, ignoring as an aside that doesn't always necessarily clarify the implications of inference use of prompt materials, but nonetheless, if you have that situation, yes, the risk ultimately for the end user for non-commercial use is very low unless people are uploading substantial amounts of potentially infringing material and or using it commercially. It's likely to be some while before we get that IPO update in terms of any guidance on exceptions, and realistically we're going to be waiting for the outcome of the government consultation there. But we've taken the view that having a ready-made session looking in detail at text and data mining gives us something that we can quickly and easily update when we do need to give some sort of guidance on the new statutory updates as a result of the government consultation. But until we get that, yes, we have got ambiguity, but realistically I would take a view that it's most likely that if we do see a legal challenge around generative AI other than the ones that we already know of, it's likely after that update that it's going to be someone making a commercial use that is going to be testing the limits of any new exceptions rather than non-commercial teaching use or non-commercial research in our sector. But as I say, that final part is an opinion on what could we say. Why don't we necessarily say that or update our guidance? Well, we're also concerned that we want to make certain that our researchers, our students, are understanding that there is definitely a risk management balance to be had with our copyright advice, and we want them to be thinking about not necessarily assuming that, well, we can push barriers and we can go, or perhaps assume that if we give a certain amount of guidance, well, people will take that beyond what's actually realistically safe or beyond where they should be in terms of their own risk management. Instead, we're taking the view that, well, we would rather give sound advice on areas that we know that people can realistically do, but then engage on an individual basis or on group basis and give more clear advice in that kind of session and environment. But we don't want to give people the idea that, yes, push the boundaries beyond what is going to be a useful use at this point in time into somewhere where, yes, they're going beyond that sort of AI literacy point that we're trying to get them to. Okay, at this point, I think I'm going to be handing over to Liesl.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. That was fantastic. Just a clarification, I know you had reference to IPEC on there, like the Intellectual Property Enterprise Court, the effective small claims court, isn't it? That is
exactly, that's it, yes. So far, the sort of cheaper track than High Court claims, yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Andrew. Fantastic. Liesl, are you ready?
I am indeed. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfectly.
Brilliant. Hello, folks. I'm going to run you through very quickly Leeds Beckett's approach to AI more generally, how that links in with our copyright approach, and where we're looking at moving forward to. Leeds Beckett was in some ways quite early adopters in trying to create a unified policy on AI, but then we've had quite a cautious approach and have been a little bit slower to respond with more recent developments. So the easiest place to start, I think, is going to be my giving you a bit of a timeline. So in April 2023, a few months after ChatGPT had launched in November 2022, we drafted interim guidance. This was pretty much all focused on academic integrity. The idea was we were going to give firmer guidance down the road, but academic integrity couldn't wait. We needed something now. So that was the first piece of the puzzle. And then copyright later on. In May 2023, I was appointed as the copyright lead at Leeds Beckett, and AI was one of the subjects discussed in my interview as a crucial challenge facing us as copyright professionals. So I knew it was a priority for the university, and one of my first tasks was drafting a guide for us on AI and copyright. I was very much indebted to Alex Fenlon, as I imagine a lot of people who've done work on AI and copyright are, both his copyright literacy talk and a blog post on the subject, which was massive inspiration for the blog post that I went on to write in August 2023, which then evolved into our institutional guide. Then moving on a year, January 2024, we adopted our final university principles. They were still largely around academic integrity, but we did touch on other matters like data privacy and copyright. It was a relatively cautious approach. We asked students to clearly reference AI use and acknowledge it on a separate form as part of submissions, just the same way you would reference any other tool. And then in terms of institutional policy, that's been the big last thing that we've done. We've remained relatively static. Our senior leadership team wanted a bit of time to see the existing policy in action and to reflect on how various people were using AI. We've seen people at one end of the spectrum who are using it very, very actively, and then other people who are much more cautious, a lot of people sitting in the middle, and that's very much impacting which schools are using it lots and how they're using it. Now we've had a bit of a chance to gauge institutional use without having the ability to review our existing guidance and see what points to expand on. So I'm expecting more news on that in the coming months. That's not to say that we've remained static on a more granular level, though, in terms of AI support. We've got an institutional co-pilot license, which we've set up so any data inputted isn't added to the large language model training data in the background. I've also incorporated an AI section into my standard copyright session that I deliver to staff and research students, which covers the copyright and data considerations that people need to bear in mind. And we've also been undertaking some experimental AI use as a library. We figured that we as librarians need to understand the new tool so we can best advise our users on safe, effective use. To name some of those projects, we've reviewed using AI to copy edit our website in places, to design potential cover images for that website, and also the possibilities of using research-focused AI tools. So what does that advice boil down to? It mostly comes down to this simple slide and 3 principles. The first and most important, don't put copyrighted material into AI, which adds submissions to an LLM. We've explained to students and staff that most AI software includes in the terms and conditions that it's users' responsibility not to add copyrighted data, and several publishers now include in their terms and conditions that they prohibit AI use. By avoiding putting copyright work into an LLM which trains on submissions, we avoid getting into any licensing issues. And in my copyright sessions, I do give additional context about how submissions are added to LLM training data, and the AI is excluded by our standard text and data mining exception for the moment at least. However, that prohibits a lot of AI use, which we also know from talking to staff and students isn't good from a research perspective. So we've adopted the lower risk strategy of advising them to use LLMs that don't collect data for their training sets. That has been helped a lot by having the institutional co-pilot license, as we can encourage them to use co-pilot and reassure them that they don't need to do any additional setup. Their inputs automatically don't get added to the LLM, as we've got a private instance of the platform in our institutional copy. Then again, that doesn't just tie them into Copilot. There are other platforms which have that option. For instance, ChatGPT allows you to exclude your submissions from being added to the training data. When it comes to sensitive data, though, we did feel that from a GDPR point of view, it was worth being hardline. There wasn't really a way around that. So we asked staff and students to never add any sensitive data to their submissions. Under GDPR, we would always need the ability to remove sensitive data if asked, and we don't have control over where data submitted to the LLM was stored, let alone its removal. So that would create GDPR issues, potential ethical issues. So a blanket ban felt like the correct approach. So where next? We are obviously waiting on reviewing our institutional guidance, and there are a few features that we're looking forward to in particular that might be a bit of a game changer. First and unsurprisingly, we're all waiting for the outcome of the UK copyright consultation. We've had a few chats internally about what that might look like, but we're basically holding fast until we know what we're allowed to do with LLMs, if the TDM exception is changed up, while potentially the issue, obviously, if the opt-in out aspect is extended to more TDM more widely. We're also expecting impact from newer technology. I'm watching with interest the work of various publisher platforms that have embedded AI software. JSTOR's had AI for a while, and that does a lot of summarizing articles and recommending similar work to you. And it looks like various other publishers are looking at rolling that out. I know Clarivate are somewhat controversial right now, as they're promoting AI as a rationale for their changed service offerings, but I will be interested to see how that functions as well. What they seem to be talking about looks a little bit similar to the JSTOR model. Open access and its relationship to AI is also a hot topic that we anticipate being a point in the future. One of the platforms we're currently exploring is Kenius, which uses Unpaywall as a training set, and they recommend you articles related to your area of research. But we're also seeing some backlash to AI in this area. Repositories that are being affected by data scrapers, and we're also having academics who want their work behind a paywall to avoid the risk it will be scraped by AI. So depending how that shapes up, we're anticipating some changes potentially in open access and people's attitudes towards it as a result of AI. And I'll paste these into the chat as well, but I want to put up some useful resources. So I've included our copyright guide from Leeds Beckett and our general university principles, but I also wanted to touch on some of the pieces that have been inspirational for me. So I've included my colleague Liz's project on the library website, which talks a lot about the work we've been doing at Leeds Beckett using AI and the considerations we've borne in mind. And then obviously Alex Fenlon's AI piece, which was very inspirational for us in drafting our policy. And similarly, more recently, Wolfson College, Cambridge, have put together a really good page on AI for academic purposes. They don't talk so much about copyright, but they talk a lot about different platforms students can use and some of the risks. And it's a cautious yet positive approach to AI that I think people might find quite useful. Thank you very much for listening. I will toss the ball over to Ben to wrap us up.
Great. Thank you, Liesl.
Yeah, thank you, Liesl. And yes, sorry to crash into you there, Ben. Thanks very much, Liesl. And yeah, Ben, please take it away.
Thanks, Chris. And yeah, thanks for those links as well, Liesl. I'll go and have a look at those afterwards. So yeah, I suggested that I go last today, as I recognise that Sheffield and Leeds Beckett were the early adopters in this area, and it's been great to hear from Andrew and Liesl, particularly about how things have developed over the last couple of years. I feel like things have certainly developed at a slower pace at York, which I'll just reflect on in terms of there being an emerging need for support. So the university, we've been committed to the Russell Group principles on supporting students and staff to become AI literate, using tools effectively and appropriately. I think this is also reflected in the statement from Sheffield that Andrew shared. And yeah, we know that there is activity here at York. We know that there are taught modules that deal with AI specifically. We know we have specialist research centres and people doing work with AI and studying AI across all of our faculties, and it's been difficult to keep track of all of this where it's been cropping up. But the thing is, not many copyright related inquiries relating to AI have actually found their way to the library, and particularly not to our team. So I work in the open research team, and so my involvement is mainly with research staff and postgraduates, not so much with teaching staff or undergraduates. I did speak to one of our faculty librarian colleagues about this. They just reflected on, we've had very few inquiries from students about using AI so far, but they said, I don't think this means they're not using it. Obviously, they just don't see it as something that they should be coming to the library to ask about. I did a brief survey just of the actual inquiries that we have had since around about early 2023. And yeah, we've had a couple of authors asking us, because they've had these licensing agreements, addendums handed to them from publishers, particularly from Cambridge University Press. So yeah, asking for our thoughts on that. We've had a hypothetical question about uploading papers to a commercial LLM, and a few inquiries around transcription and accessibility tools, and particularly tools that we don't formally support as an institution. But again, those inquiries, they don't tend to find their way to me or to our team in general. In terms of training provision, yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. We have academic skills training on generative AI and AI and creativity, especially. But yeah, they don't tend to, they address copyright briefly, but it's definitely not the focus of those sessions. And yeah, and just in general, our copyright training. So I do a very brief introduction to copyright for researchers, but really that it's a 30-minute long session. I try to keep it as brief as possible. There's certainly more that I would like to do with copyright training and guidance, but at the moment there hasn't really been scope there to talk about generative AI considerations in much detail. So the university position, yeah, just a few quotes here where actually copyright and IP is mentioned in the various bits of guidance that we have dotted around the university website. The main point here being that we don't have a unifying policy, we don't have a statement of principles or anything like that. And actually the guidance, when it does mention copyright, it's very much focused on the risks and the uncertainty that are involved here. And also with that IT services guidance, which pops up on the software pages for Gemini and for Notebook LM and for Copilot. It assumes that the publisher is the default rights holder when it comes to copyrighted content, which of course isn't always the case. So yeah, really this guidance, it contributes to that sense of copyright anxiety, I guess, amongst staff and students. But also I think this is to be expected, because and I assume that this kind of guidance is fairly standard across the sector, just because of the unresolved questions, the unresolved legal issues, just the general uncertainty and the rush to produce this institutional guidance over the last couple of years. And in terms of support supported tools. So yeah, we've already talked a bit about Notebook LM. So we're Google Workspace for Education institutions. So Gemini is our preferred Gen AI tool. And yeah, and we also promote Notebook LM. And yes, Andrew and Liesl talked about, it's a private space. It comes with those assurances around user data and whether those prompts and uploads not being used for wider training. And yeah, there's this point about about Google's user indemnification clause, which yeah, as I've said in the chat, I've not dug into this. It's not something that's addressed in like that IT services guidance. It's something that it's relevant, and I think it should be addressed as part of the user responsibilities that are set out for these tools. But yeah, I guess the main point here is that users, that we know people aren't necessarily using these specific tools. They have very strong preferences when it comes to the tools that they're most familiar with. This is something I really got from talking to PGRs at a recent session. You know, they've got these strong relationships with particular tools. And especially ChatGPT, it's still the most popular tool in general that people are using, but it's not a recommended tool. So what's happened since then? So I produced this guidance following, well, yeah, partly following the examples of Andrew and Liesl, and also the discussions that we've had just within this community and on CopySeek. So I just put together some very brief guidance on AI for researchers. I was asked to contribute to a workshop in our School for Business and Society, but that was very short. But much like this session, I had a short slot in between talking about the focus really was on wider ethical issues. So yeah, EDI. So yeah, it's hard to cover everything in that session. But yeah, actually, this is opening up new connections. So now I've been added to this Library Archives Learning Services AI group. So we have links through to University Teaching Committee and other groups who are seeking a more joined up approach when it comes to training and strategy. And also we were asked to contribute to this new draft guidance on principles for using AI in research, which came from our University Research Committee. So yeah, having an opportunity to contribute to the wording of that guidance has been a really positive step, and would have been good to have that opportunity earlier on. So next steps, we've got obviously improving our LibGuide and our training offer, making it more relevant to teaching staff and to students as well, providing that context, that legal context, so that people can weigh up the risks and the potential opportunities that are involved using these tools. Actually addressing the legal exceptions and things like open licensing and other ways that people can make use of these tools. Keeping up to date with the latest developments. So university guidance is changing. We've already talked about how we're all waiting for the outcome from the government consultation. Also, just things like the university maybe adopting new tools and having to keep on top of things like the tools that publishers provide that Liesl mentioned. I saw that there's a new AI companion in Science Direct that was launched last week. So yeah, things like that. And I was thinking how there's I feel like we have a compulsion to try and make sure that our academics know that we're on top of the latest developments, and that we're aware of what's happening in the wider world. But yeah, it's weighing that up with actually what is our role here. Do we need to provide like a news feed for our users? Yeah, maybe not. That's a lot. It's a lot to keep on top of, especially at the moment when there are news stories every day that we're aware of relating to AI and copyright. And Liesl already mentioned this intersection of open access and AI and the issues that brings up. So that's something I want to explore as well, just with my role being in the open research team, looking at what the tensions and opportunities are when it comes to open research and generative AI and what we do with it. So yeah, I think that's me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much, Ben. That was a really good final presentation out of the three of you. I think we've got a little bit of time for some questions, and I know there's been quite a bit in the chat as well. And something that struck me yesterday when I was talking to our chair of our AI and Education Steering Group, which has actually got its first meeting this afternoon. We've kind of had a working group and now it's been formalised at City St George's, but maybe we're in a sort of similar time to like back in about 2015 when lots of universities were looking at putting in large scale lecture capture systems, and what we were saying about copyright and what we could say that you could and couldn't do with particularly like third party content. And Chris and we did some research into kind of like what policies said and then kind of what practice and how that might differ. And I'm kind of really struck that it feels, and what I said to our chair yesterday was I wondered if we need to issue some guidance around copyright, but it's too early to start trying to write a policy. And I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, obviously we've got the government consultation that we're waiting for the outcome of, but policies are kind of pretty serious things. But kind of at the moment, are we all being actually quite cautious in our guidance like we might have been 10 years ago around saying, oh, best not to put content into third-party content into recorded lectures because we just didn't know. And now we're all a bit more comfortable with that. And so yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think how we give guidance in these areas where there's just so much uncertainty. It's more of a kind of comment than a question, I suppose, but I don't know what your response is, Ben.
So I think we're all in a similar position here, aren't we? And but yeah, I think having dug into this a little bit now, I'm finding that those doors are opening to other individuals and groups across the university, and that's been really interesting to see. And I think people are happy for us to just go ahead and produce this guidance, and I think they're just happy that someone is willing to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, I can reflect on what is happening at Oxford. So I've been asked to contribute to a policy in the use of generative AI in research. And actually they were initial draft sort of picked up and was almost putting the guidance-y stuff in the policy. And then what I was saying is actually, I think what we need to do is make some very high level statements in the policy about ensuring that you consider copyright and other types of IP. And then the guidance can flex, and respond to the changes as we are hearing what comes back from the consultation, where we think the law is going to go, and also just learning from each other about what we think we can say. I guess there's that thing, isn't it? If we're talking about the fact that some of these providers provide us with indemnities and others might not, to what extent does our guidance need to be quite granular on each of the different types of tools?
But this
or
one
how
is
much
okay, or
how
this
much can we provide that sort of overarching umbrella thing? I mean, it would be interesting to hear all of you really, of your thoughts on that if you went through that process.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll jump in on that one. I think it's an important point, and that was sort of part of what I was getting at on that final slide, is that it's important, I think, to note that we can give guidance where there is clear information as it stands, where we've got a reasonably sound basis for understanding, well, yes, we think that there is, you know, a strong basis, for instance, for a particular activity to rely on a lawful exception, or where there is a clear licensing justification for it, for example. But yeah, the point I was stressing was that what I'm also wary of is expanding guidance in a way that gives an unrealistic picture, particularly to colleagues or students who've got less knowledge of copyright or who aren't familiar with it. So that it's taking that cautious view for them. But at the same time, yeah, I can recognise that there's definitely, you know, there's a grey area there, and it's a question of how far do we go with that. And in terms of granularity, as Chris said, well, yes, that is, you know, it's a very pertinent point in a sense, because the differences between different supplier licenses, different supplier terms and conditions, whether or not you can rely on an exception for one particular use, but not in another circumstance, might something be okay covered within a teaching activity and so on. I think that at the point that we're at right now, and particularly given that we know that we're under the shadow of, at some stage, a promised update in terms of the statute, there's too many different permutations if you try and cover them all. The guidance can't cover it all. So instead, that's why we've chosen to sort of go with a more, you know, a more straightforward guidance, but then tackle that. And we're finding that we are getting engagement from researchers, and so at least for us at Sheffield, it's working, and it's good to see.
Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. Liesl, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, to build on that, I think that was why we wanted our guidance to be really straightforward and explainable in a single slide, because it meant people were much more likely to engage with it. I think looking forward for us, and it's one of the reasons why I'm really waiting on the consultation, is we're definitely seeing, on the one end, we've got people who are very positive about AI and are going to try and use it in whatever way they can, but are just unsure exactly what's under TDM and what isn't. But then on the other end, you've got people who are very concerned about their work ending up in AI. So our policy isn't just advising people on the correct copyright approach, but it's also being interpreted by those people as being for or against AI, if that makes sense, and adding to anxiety around it or making people feel that much more comfortable with it. So I think that was very much always in my mind of this is a bit of a political hot potato when it comes to research. And it isn't just about the correct guidance, but it's about showing that we take being cautious about it seriously.
Yeah, I think there's nothing quite like telling people, you know, when they're sort of asking, can they do things with, you know, other people's content? It's kind of like, okay, so, but how do you feel about your own content then? So that's all going to be put into an AI, and oh, hang on a minute, no, that's not what I was expecting. Andrew, you've got your hand up. Yeah, did you want to come in? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of follow on from that point that Liesl made there, I think that we have to accept that realistically this technology isn't going anywhere. You know, it's the genie isn't going back in the bottle, or, you know, however you choose to phrase it. And so I think that there's an important role for us in that critical AI literacy, but also, you know, copyright is an essential part of that. It's part of, you know, the lawfulness of use and the lawfulness of the tools that we're using is part of the ethical picture around generative AI use. And I think it's important that we're educating our researchers about that. But I think that given that this technology is going to be used, yes, you know, there are going to be tools that, for example, are doing things that, well, we don't want to support, all tools that we've got an institutional agreement with, for instance. So there are going to be nuances there, but ultimately it's most important, I think, to make sure that people do get the information from us and that we are engaging with them, rather than sort of trying to take an ideological view, but yeah, it's understandable that a lot of creators are obviously very worried about this, and hence that's why we're also seeing so much litigation in this area, not specifically in the UK, but overseas.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, this is just a fascinating conversation. We know we'll continue. Bart, you've got your hand up, and I would like to bring you in, Bart. I have a poll. I have a question for everybody here, which is on the topic, but maybe a slightly left turn. Bart, do you want to come on and ask your question or make your comment? Because I know you've been thinking deeply about this. And also, well done, Bart, on driving forward the Create response to the government consultation, which is an excellent piece of work. And if you haven't read the Create response to the government consultation, then you should. So Bart,
thanks for that. And I mean, it's so interesting. First of all, congratulations to all presenters. They've been really, really interesting and informative presentations, and they've raised a lot of interesting points which we won't be able to address in the next 2 minutes. But yeah, I'm very keen to continue the conversation. I mean, one point I wanted to make was on the open research side. I think that's also, I mean, it's probably worth a whole webinar, like how in this whole debate, how the research data can contribute to AI use and development, and the role that higher education has in that. I think that's a really important one. But more on the practical side, I think we discussed indemnity briefly, but I hadn't really thought about it. But then that reminded me of a conversation I had with someone working in the insurance business, and I asked him about copyright. He used a lot of AI, and he was like, I don't care about copyright. I got a contract with OpenAI, and they give me the copyright shield, so they give me indemnity. So I just don't care about it. So I think most higher education institutions have contracts with either Google, Microsoft, now OpenAI, and all of those contracts have those indemnities. And I just saw, like, while we were talking, the Google one explicitly says, we're committed to having an ongoing dialogue, about use cases that are not currently covered. So I wonder whether, that's a way of looking at these issues. You have the contract and what the contract covers you against, and you can have, if you're worried about, okay, this is not covered maybe by the contract, then maybe ask Google, ask Microsoft, as part of that ongoing dialogue that they're committed to, like, is this covered? You can ask them by the indemnity. And then the guidance we've been talking about is mostly about everything else. Like, okay, if we have an institutional contract with Microsoft, but you're using Notebook, you're using ChatGPT, then these are all the considerations. But under the thing we pay for, everything is safer. I don't know. That may be an approach to risk management.
It does make me think of the kind of point I was making when we were discussing the consultation amongst CNAC, and we were thinking about licensing, about, like, where these agreements need to sit, and if it kind of transpires that, well, this is not going to be acceptable to do it, that it's kind of Google and OpenAI and these kind of companies that need to have the agreement. Trying to put licenses in at institutional level always feels to me like we're trying to kind of, we're overly complicating a problem that could be solved much more easily, going straight to, the people at the top that are providing the platforms. Thank you, Bart. Lovely to see you. And I think you've volunteered yourself for a webinar on that topic.
Yeah.
I think we have that recorded.
Yes.
So but we will I look forward to talking to you soon. I know I didn't catch up with you the other day. So
thanks, Bart.
Yeah, cheers.
So I think we've got to the time. We want to say thank you to Liesl, Andrew, Ben for coming and talking to us. Excellent presentations. I think everyone agrees. Am I going to do this poll? Am I going to put this question in, or is it going to put the cat amongst the pigeons? What do you think?
Pop it in.
I will put it. Right.
Yeah.
This is something I've been thinking about. I've been talking to colleagues at Oxford, because we now have, I don't know whether you've seen, a partnership with OpenAI. We've been looking at our machine learning, AI and machine learning competency center. If we were to think as a community about creating a copyright advice chatbot that trains on List COOLSIG and trains on other authoritative sources of information, not talking about creating a commercial thing, this is something I think would be fascinating to see what it comes up with. There's all sorts of fascinating ethical questions. Many of us in this community are copyright advisors. Are we putting ourselves out of a job? But this is coming.
Yeah, and this is where all the information you need is. It's inside a disc mail list.
and in the past, you would think, well, it's impossible to do that. How could you actually come up with an accurate model? What we're seeing now tells us, okay, exactly, AI hallucinations, caveats, absolutely. The idea that I've been thinking about is, how could we do that in a way that the community owns it and has the caveats, and that we would be able to interrogate that collectively? I don't know. It's kind of like let's walk the walk as well as talk the talk.
This one.
It's just an idea, because I know we talk to researchers who are at the coalface of using these tools in ways that could, like, why as a community are we not? This
could really help us.
It could help us, and it would allow us to really,
or as you say, put us out of job.
Well, it could do, or no, it could help us do our jobs better. That's the argument.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much, Liesl. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Ben.
We don't have people saying no, not sure. Can we discuss further? That is something to put on the list. Let's come back to that.
We can get our slides back up, Chris.
We can.
We've just got a quick thing we want to end on before everybody disappears, because I'm aware it's after 12 o'clock, and we have I think we might need to get rid of that poll as well for us, please, at some point. Thank you.
I think that if people can make the poll go away, it just happens to be on the screen there. Yeah. Okay,
so we've got some future webinars coming up. We are also, just to remind you, as we mentioned at the start, we're moving away from Blackboard Collaborate. So ALTS have announced that they will be using Zoom from April. So expect some small changes to how you get access to these webinars. It may be likely that you'll need to register just because of the sort of security issues to make sure we only get the right people in the Zoom room, but we will try to make it as straightforward as possible. We are also looking for speakers for our next webinar, which is going to be on the 25th of April. It's Becoming a Copyright Specialist Part 5. So if you are a copyright specialist, if you're early in your journey, if you're late in your journey, if you would like to talk about it. It's not
the part 5 where one of the copyright specialists gets encased in carbonite at the end.
It's that one. Yeah, it is that one.
Okay,
yeah,
right.
It's like Empire Strikes Back, definitely.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah. But call for speakers is now out. We'll put a reminder. We'll put something on List CopySeek as well. But we would love to have 3 people come and talk to us about their copyright journey. And we will be nagging some people as well, or kind of reminding them. We've just got one last thing, haven't we, as well, which we wanted to flag up. Hopefully Stephen is still here. So I know we mentioned this, or Stephen's posted on List CopySeek, but I was at his leaving do on Wednesday evening. So he's now our former copyright librarian at City St George's. Just want to congratulate Stephen on his new job. He'll be starting in April as Copyright and Scholarly Communications Library or librarian. Will he be either of those?
He's working in copyright and scholarly communications
at the World Bank. Stephen, I hope you're still there. Stephen, I hope you are.
Can you hear me?
There you are.
We just want to say congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And that was a bit of a surprise. You didn't know I was doing that, did you?
No,
that's why I took that photo.
No. No, my job title is copyright consultant.
Okay. But fantastic news, safe trip, and we look forward to hearing from you about all your adventures, and we do hope you're going to stay on List CopySeek and join our webinars occasionally, even though we know it means you've got to get up at 6 in the morning.
I don't think I can stay on List CopySeek because I won't have a British university email address anymore.
I think we'll let you.
No, that's.
I think the list owners might make an exception.
Well, no,
if you want.
Okay, yes, that isn't actually one of the criteria for
membership. That isn't the criteria.
That would be really helpful, actually. And yes, I will certainly carry on attending the webinars, maybe the recordings.
Lovely. Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to stop the recording now, and lovely to see you all today, and hopefully you found that useful. We'll get the recording up.
See you next time. Bye-bye.